In my series on Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, today I'll offer a brief summary of Chapter 4. So let's begin. So please keep in mind that we have read the entire book, word by word, line by line, and then discussed it. So this summary should not be taken as an all-exhaustive account of my understanding of the book or Chapter 4, but rather as a guide to exploring the whole book. So first, how do we get to Chapter 4? Before we get to Chapter 4, Paulo Freire has already set up in Chapter 1 the main project of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, to create a system in which everyone can attain their full humanity. He then teaches us about two modes of didactics or teaching: the banking system of education, which is top-down, and the problem-posing or problem-solving educational system, which, of course, is what he's trying to develop in the book. In Chapter 2, then, he further elaborates on these two modes of teaching and what are the implications of following the banking model of education, but also what is important in developing a problem-posing, problem-solving educational method. But throughout, he's also teaching us about praxis, which is reflection and action combined become praxis, but also relationships amongst people, especially as a revolutionary leadership develops. In Chapter 3, he gives us the detailed account of how to do research, how to interact with the people, how to find out the thematic universe which generates other themes within which people live, and then how, along with the people, we develop a curriculum for liberation. Chapter 4 takes us towards the revolutionary praxis of the people who have gone through the educational system that he has proposed. The idea in this chapter is to give us a sort of a loose blueprint into the revolutionary praxis itself, into bringing about a just society and change. So in the beginning part of the chapter, he discusses what are anti-dialogical ways of doing things, which is the oppressive order in which the people do not have any say. And then counter to that, what he offers is the dialogical mode of resistance. Each one of these, the anti-dialogical praxis and the dialogical praxis, he divides into 4 categories. Now remember, in the previous chapters, he has already discussed what is a dialogue, what are its basic constituent parts like hope, love, critical thinking. So by dialogical, what he means is a praxis that incorporates what he has taught us in the previous chapters. He first discusses 4 characteristics of the anti-dialogical way of doing things, and those are conquest, divide and rule, manipulation, and cultural invasion. So, the first and foremost, an oppressive system works through conquest, physical conquest of the people, but also the conquest of their consciousness and their minds. And one aspect of the conquest is that the conquered do not have a say in how they are treated, how they are viewed, how do they behave. Their views are not included in the dynamic that emerges. Connected to that is divide and rule. How do you bring about conquest? By dividing the people, by pitting them against each other through religion, right? Through ethnic identities, through regional identities. So the conquerors conquer by dividing the people, by not enabling them to come together. Divide and rule was an amazing policy that was used by all the colonizers historically and is still used in contemporary politics. If you look at American politics, so many of us who work and who have to sell our labors, our interests are the same, right? But socially, we can still be divided, whereas we could be working at the same job, experiencing the same kind of exploitation, but politically we are aligned with a different group because we are looking at it in racial terms or we are looking at it in regional terms. So that is the divide and rule. But obviously I've covered these in detail in the previous conversations about the chapter when we read it. Manipulation, the same thing. It can be manipulation through the educational system. It can be manipulation of people through media, manipulation of people by literally convincing them that it's in their best interest to follow the order in which they live. But it is yet another tool that enables the anti-dialogical forces to maintain their power. And the final is cultural invasion. Now, cultural invasion can be direct, where you supplant a culture with your own and enforce your way of looking at the world on the people, or it can also be subtle, where it is done through ideological means. It might involve conquest, it might involve divide and rule, it might involve aligning people's interests to the interests of the oppressive class. All of these are ways in which one thing that runs through them is that the dominant group gets to dictate what is culture, manipulates people, divides them, and has conquered them either materially or ideologically. These four modes of operation, so to speak, is what he calls the anti-dialogical praxis, against which he teaches us four dialogical modes of resistance and transformation. So against the four anti-dialogical modes of praxis, he offers us four dialogical modes of transforming the world of revolutionary praxis. And those are cooperation, unity for liberation, organization, and cultural synthesis. Now, cooperation is offered against conquest, in a way. Then unity for liberation is offered against divide and rule. Organization against manipulation, and cultural synthesis against cultural invasion. Now, he goes into detail in explaining all of these four modes of revolutionary praxis. And as I said, I've discussed them in detail, but here just a brief summary, and keep that in mind. So cooperation is cooperation amongst the people as equals, but also cooperation between the people and the so-called leadership. It will never be a situation in which the leaders get to dictate what they want people to do, or one group of people dictating to others. So cooperation, in a sense, would be built by a thorough understanding of the situation in which people are in, and in a way which is democratic, and where the leaders listen to the people and people have a say in coming together against the oppressive order. And it is offered against the dominant group's practice of conquest. Now, unity for liberation involves two kinds of unities. Unity amongst the people of their interests, that they can only do when they know the kind of world in which they live, and their unity with the leadership. And it cannot be built forcefully, and it cannot be built with the promise of change. By the time we get to this point in revolutionary praxis, we have already learned where we are, what oppresses us, what are our interests, and how best to dialogically come together towards liberation of all. Organization is the part where Freire goes into discussing the two extremes. One is a purely populist revolutionary movement in which people have no responsibility, no restraints, and he calls that licentiousness. And the other is authoritarianism, where the leaders take up the role of defining what the revolution would be. What he's encouraging us to think and practice is a mode in which leaders have a vision, but that vision is tempered by the people's opinion. And people also know that liberation means responsibility, right? So at no point can the revolutionary movement can become a free-for-all, nor can it become something that the leaders say, this is what we will do. So a combination of the two, aspirations of the people tempered by responsibility, and the vision of the leaders without authoritarianism, combined together, will then lead to liberation. And cultural synthesis then is offered in opposition to cultural invasion, right? So since it's a synthesis, what it presupposes is that whatever different strands of ways of looking at the world are available, they need to be synthesized. And when you synthesize something, you do not obliterate one part and create another one. You take the acceptable parts of differing opinions and form a synthesis. In terms of leaders and people, then, it would take what the leaders aspire to do and what the people's aspirations are, and take what is practical and useful towards liberation and create a cultural synthesis. So these are 4 dialogical modes of resistance and transformation that he offers against the 4 anti-dialogical modes of doing things in chapter 4. So in conclusion, when we get to chapter 4, we have already learned that the purpose of revolutionary change is to create a space or time in which everyone can realize their full humanity, that it is a didactical process. It involves learning and teaching, that teaching cannot be the banking system of education. It has to be problem-posing system of education, and the interaction has to be dialogic, which means both sides have a say in it. It cannot be top-down or implemented by a dominant group. Then we learn in chapter 3 how best to devise a method of pedagogy which includes expert opinions but also includes the opinions of the people, and which enables people to see their own reality in teaching materials as they have informed the development of teaching materials, and they can see their own reality objectively and analyze it, right? And learn about their own lived condition. And then in chapter 4, we take all that knowledge and apply it to what is the system, the anti-dialogical way of doing things, and what possibilities exist if we develop a dialogical mode of praxis and revolutionary change. So that's roughly my summary of the chapter. I hope this is useful to you. I'm sure I've left out quite a few things. Please point those out to me. But also do keep in mind that we have over 60 conversations on the book. We have read the book from beginning to the end. So most probably the best approach for you would be, yes, do take a look at this summary, do listen to this summary, but follow the entire series and read the book with us. And I can promise you, it will be a transformative experience for you. Thank you. Stay safe. Take care. And I will now see you next time. Until then, peace and love.